What is up, YouTube? It has been a minute, but man, do I have a story time for you guys. Let's get right into it. So, I work at a sporting goods store, and like any sort of retail store, we have to deal with people trying to steal things. And we had a trio of people come in, and I thought that's what we were trying to do, was prevent them from stealing things. But man, was I wrong about that. They didn't, well, actually, let me get into that part later. So, I had a trio of older individuals come in. I think they were probably like anywhere from early 50s to probably like mid 60s, somewhere in that age gap. And there was a female, a taller gentleman, and as we would find out later, a shorter gentleman. The shorter gentleman is the main character of this story. So I get to work and they come in shortly after I do. And my manager's like, hey, we've got two people to keep an eye out for. It's going to be a female and a taller, older gentleman. And we're like, okay. So we're keeping eyes on them, making sure they don't grab anything and try to run, anything like that. And I work in the fulfillment department, so I have to grab orders, take them out to cars, things like that. So as I'm going to take an order out to a car, I happen to see that the local police are talking to the female of the group outside, and she's up against the cop car. She's not in handcuffs or anything. She's just leaned against the cop car talking to the cops. And what I found out was the vehicle that they got out of, the VIN number and the license plate have been tied to a string of thefts and robberies in the area. So it was more of the cops were just kind of questioning them, trying to figure out what was going on. But as far as I know, they didn't have any sort of like stolen items in the vehicle, so they couldn't necessarily charge them, I think. I don't really know the whole story with that. And so the cop comes in afterwards and is talking to my manager, and I just happen to be close by at that point in time. And the cop's like, hey, did you guys happen to see the shorter guy? And my manager's like, there's only supposed to be the tall guy and the female. And the cop's like, no, it's a trio of them. And so my manager goes in the back and looks at the footage and ends up seeing that there was a third person that came in with them, and lets me and another coworker know what he looks like. He's a shorter guy. He kind of looks like a hobbit. He's kind of hobbled along, and he's got a red hat. And I'm like, okay. I wasn't necessarily scoping the guy out or trying to find him or anything like that. I was just doing my job. And I'm walking past the restroom, and I happen to see the guy come out of the restroom. And I get on the radio, and I'm like, hey, is it a red hat or is it a two-tone hat? Because I didn't want to, falsely think that I had located the third person. And my manager's like, it's a two-tone hat. And I'm like, okay, so that was that guy. So I radio my manager, and I'm like, hey, he's going over by the shoes. And he just came out of the restroom. My manager's like, okay. And I didn't grow up in the greatest area. And I don't know, I just kind of used common sense, I guess. And I was like, I'm going to go check the restroom just to see if there might be any like ripped open packages or boxes or anything like that. And so checked the stalls, or checked a couple of the stalls, didn't see anything on the floor, checked the trash can, didn't see anything crammed in there. And something told me in the first stall to look where the toilet seat covers are. And so I just kind of lean to where I can see like this, like into the toilet seat cover container thing. And I happen to see a small baggie, what in the streets you would probably call a dime bag. I don't know if that terminology has changed since the 2000s, but used to call it a dime bag. And I'm like, what is that? And I start to grab it, and then I'm like, I don't know if that's fentanyl, and I don't want to die. So I radioed my manager, and I'm like, hey, didn't find any sort of packages that were ripped open or anything like that, but I found a bag, and you might want to grab some gloves. And my manager's like, okay. So my manager meets me in the restroom, and he's got gloves on, and I'm like, hey, there's a little bag down in the toilet seat covers. And my manager reaches in there and pulls it out. It's a dime bag full of crystal meth. Like, it had a pretty good sized rock, probably about a gram and a half worth, in just that one rock alone. And I'm like, no shot. This dude stashed crystal meth in the restroom. I'm like, there's no shot. There's no conceivable way that this person did that. And I'm gonna put the picture up now that I took of the bag so that you can see the crystal meth that was in there, because it was a lot. I was like, that's way too much. Like, what are we doing? And so my manager reaches out to corporate, and they're like, hey, just to let you know, we found some narcotics. We've called the local cops, and they're coming to check it out and do whatever they need to do with it, because we don't know what to do, kind of deal. And called the local police department, and they're like, just leave it there. Make sure nobody tries to grab it, anything like that, and we'll have somebody come pick it up. So I ended up having to stay in the restroom for about 10 minutes or so until the cops showed up, just kind of making sure nobody went in that stall. Basically, just kind of closed the men's restroom down at that point. And cop walks in, because we ended up putting the bag like behind the toilet seat itself, just kind of sitting on the, I guess, where you would consider where a tank would be in a public restroom. And the cop walks in, and he puts gloves on, and he picks it up, and he goes, wow, that's a lot. And I said, yeah, it's probably about a gram and a half to 2 grams altogether. And the cop and my manager both just turn and look at me. And I'm like, what? I didn't grow up in a great area, and I pay attention to things. And the cop was like, you want a job? And I was like, no, I'm good, but thanks for the offer. So the cop takes crystal meth and wraps it up in his glove and gets my information and everything. And about 2 hours later, I'm working in Shoes, which is close by our restroom. And our person up at the podium that kind of keeps an eye out for people that look suspicious and have backpacks and things of that nature, he gets on the radio, and he's like, hey, our person from earlier came back. And I immediately responded. I'm like, hey, I bet I know what he's here for. And my manager responded back and said, yeah, me too. And he said, I'm going to go ahead and call the local police department. So he does that, and the guy comes over by the restrooms, and he's just kind of looking at some of the shoes that we've got. I guess kind of just trying to make it obvious that he wasn't back to pick up his dope. And for whatever reason, a lot of my coworkers decided to come in that same area, and they were just like talking, but they were essentially just watching the guy to see if he was going to be that bold to do it. And the entire time I'm just thinking in my head of like, you know, this guy might be on meth, but he's not an idiot. Like, he's not going to just go where he knows the stuff is with this many people being around. And I'm just thinking to myself of like, go away. And I guarantee you he will do exactly what you're wanting him to do. And so they finally go away. And sure enough, maybe a minute and a half later, he walks in the restroom, and I radio my manager. I'm like, hey, he's going to look for the stuff. And my manager's like, okay. And maybe 30 seconds after, he walks in there, an older gentleman with longer hair walks into the restroom after him, and they both are in the same stall. And I'm like, am I seeing a drug deal? Like, what is happening? Like, I was very confused as to why they were both in the same stall, because I was like, I don't think they're part of the same group, but also don't know what's happening. And so I radio my manager. I'm like, hey, there's another guy that just went in there and they're in the same stall. I don't know what they're doing. And so about, I don't know, a minute or two later, I'm back where I was in the shoes, and I'm just kind of organizing, and I'm in sight line of the restroom door, seeing when he's going to come out and what he's going to do. And I start to see him come out, and about that time, I start to see the local police department walking down the aisle towards me, coming towards the restroom. And this is the guy coming out of the restroom, and here's the local police. And he gets about to where I'm at, and I look over and I say, hey, he's coming around the corner. And about the time he meets them right at the intersection there, and the cop's like, you're not going to find what you're looking for. And the guy's like, well, I wasn't looking for anything. And I'm just like, I know you're going to lie about that, but like, come on, man. And the cop's like, well, you already got it and confiscated it. You're not going to be able to get it. And he just kept repeating himself, oh, I'm not looking for anything. I was just coming out of the restroom. And my manager ends up meeting us over there. And he tells the guy that he's trespassed and he's no longer welcome at the store. And if he comes back, he'll get arrested and that sort of thing. And so I go back doing whatever I'm doing at that point in time. And maybe another minute later, I come back down the aisle towards the restroom, and I see my manager talking with the longer haired guy that was in that same stall with him. And they're both with the local police department. And over here, my manager tell him that he's also trespassed. And I'm like, what happened in the restroom that I missed out on? And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and look in the restroom and see if I can find any sort of open package or box. Might find some more drugs. I don't really know at this point. So I go and I look in that exact same stall, and sure enough, I see a open box that has been forcibly ripped open. And I radio my manager. I'm like, hey, if the cops are still with that guy, they need to search him because I found an open package. And our manager's like, okay. So I get up towards the front, and I see that the cops are in the process of patting that guy down, and ended up finding about if I remember correctly, it was about $350 worth of merchandise. And it was hand warmers, it was ammunition, it was beanies. Like, it was just a random assortment of things. And our podium guy came over to me afterwards, and he was like, yeah, whenever the cops started patting him down, they patted his leg, and 2 small boxes of ammunition fell out of his leg pocket and went into the floor. And he said the guy just looked up and smiled. And I'm like, what is happening tonight? Like, why is all of this happening tonight? And so the guy ends up getting charged with a misdemeanor because he didn't go over the $500 requirement for a felony. And they're taking him to the precinct. And me, my manager, and the cop are all standing talking. And the cop gets a radio call that a ambulance is en route to the precinct to pick that guy up. Because apparently when that guy got to the precinct, he told the cops that whenever he was getting arrested, allegedly he had swallowed fentanyl. And if you know anything about any sort of narcotics, if you are in police possession and you tell them that you have taken any sort of narcotic, especially a very strong one like fentanyl, they have to send you to the hospital to pump your stomach to clear that out of your system, because they don't want any sort of lawsuit for you having narcotics in your system and them not taking care of that problem. So my night went from trying to keep an eye on potential shoplifters to finding crystal meth to the crystal meth guy coming back to get his crystal meth, getting trespassed by our store, to stopping a shoplifter that, to my knowledge, was not part of the original group that came in. Working in retail is fun sometimes. I told my manager, I told Maddie, I've told anybody that I've told this story to, that was the most insane night of working retail that I've ever done in my entire life. Like, don't get me wrong, I've got some interesting stories from working retail and working at Verizon, but I think that one takes the cake by a long shot. But speaking of some of those stories, if you want to hear any more of those stories, let me know down in the comments, and maybe I can make a series out of this, of just retail horror story time, and we can make it a recurring theme on the channel. But hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe down below. I will be making more content very soon. Going to be doing some shorts as well, doing a fitness journey video behind the scenes as well that I've been working on for a little bit. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Love you guys. God bless. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.